Oh boy, here we go. So hopefully you could hear me. I'm not sure. I don't think, again, this is my first time using the software, and I think I goofed the opening a little bit. Anyhow, here I am. So I guess I'll repeat what I just said a minute ago because I thought this was going live, but I missed a button. So I think I was just talking to myself, but I'm trying a couple of new things today. Happy Friday. New thing number one is I'm giving Wirecast, as you saw that logo before, giving them a try as a streaming platform. I'm not really excited about that because it's a commercial, for pay software, but they do have a 30-day free trial, so I thought I'd give it a shot. I'd be using open broadcasting software. I think is what's called OBS Studio, which is I know how to use it, really well featured, but I made the mistake of updating my Mac to the latest OS, Catalina. And something with that OS update and OBS just broke. And some people have had success getting it going again on there. I have had no success getting it going. I'm not the only one. Seems like there's a host of different problems that some people are running into. And because it is free software, community developed, thank you, community developers. But the flip side of that is that there's really no support network other than hammering the boards. I'm not a programmer of this style. I don't know anything about it or how to really make it work. And now it really took the little workflow I had of streaming. It basically, you dropped it down to zero. The other thing I'm trying is I'm streaming directly to YouTube instead of Twitch. Just giving out the try. I haven't had much traction on Twitch in the few times that I've streamed. I think part of that is just because my schedule's been all over the place. And a lot of that has to do with just, work and life. But also the fact that every time I feel like I'm getting on a roll of streaming, then something happens. And again, Catalina pretty much killed it of streaming through OBS. So I thought I'm trying out the software. The people who follow me, almost all of them follow me through YouTube. So let me see what streaming through YouTube or to YouTube directly is like. See if that ends up being a better option going forward. My intention is not to give up on Twitch, and probably while I have this free 30 days to evaluate Wirecast, I will probably see what streaming to Twitch is like and how the quality is and all that, and kind of see what the workflow is. And maybe by the end of this, I can't imagine it. Unfortunately with Wirecast, it's expensive. The base version is expensive, and the version I think I would need just for some of the things I want to do, I would need the middle tier, which is twice as much as the base tier, which is already expensive. So I don't know how that's going to work because I don't really have a budget. If you'd like to help me get a budget, I have Patreon and Ko-Fi and things like that, but we'll see. I just want to give it a try because I want to stream, and I'm just trying to find options to do that. So getting to what I want to talk about today, it's talking about encounters, random encounters. I'm a big proponent of random encounters, but I know that they're not really popular in the modern game with modern gamers for the most part. I'm not trying to paint everybody and say, nobody who plays 5th edition uses random encounters. Of course, people play their games very differently with all kinds of tools and at their disposal, and random encounters is one of them. I know that, but I think a fair amount of people don't use them for various reasons. And I thought that maybe I could make a video like this, and it would kind of work in conjunction, or at least be related to some of the hex crawling videos and things I've done of that that nature. Maybe I could make a video talking about random encounters in a way to maybe get people to look at them with new eyes if they were jaded about them because of maybe bad past experiences with them as players or as GMs. Maybe if they didn't realize what they could do or how they could utilize, that might encourage people at least give it a look. It's a tool that's there for you. So I always feel like at least, give it a look-see. Don't dismiss it out of hand. But I understand why some people dismiss it out of hand. And I'll try to talk a little bit about at least the objections that I see come up and what I think of them. I think just to go on to that just right away, I think the first thing that I see a lot is that they take away from the story. I have this great story going. I don't want to slow it down with random encounters. If you've watched any of my other videos, I'm not a big proponent on the preciousness of my story. So right away, I totally get it that they're going to be GMs that are just on a different wavelength than I am. This sort of my plot that I'm running is supreme, and me where I'm going, stories are going to make themselves. That's my point of view. And my plot is not better than whatever happens, naturally, or just through random encounters, just through any kind of dynamic events that are happening in your game. if you really feel like that your plot and everything is so engaging, so engrossing that it can't use with some shaking up, can't use with a little dynamism thrown in there, then fine. Maybe random encounters aren't worth it for you. They're not going to help you do the things that you're doing. I always think that those shakeups are good because you fall into patterns, you fall into ruts, you fall into rote where you're just kind of going along, and you may not see all these other possibilities that are bubbling along because you're on this narrow path of this is my plot. When you throw random encounters in there, it really is this ability to shake up the board. You get a chance to really jiggle things around, add in some X factors, add in some unknowns. And I always say with this stuff, it's not just what it's doing for the players. It's not just adding unknowns or things for them. It's also adds it in for you. I always think that I get a lot of inspiration, a lot of ideas. It gets my brain burning because maybe I've been on this plot and I'm already thinking 10 steps down the road from where this is going. And I'm not really focused on this. I feel like, oh, this is just going where it's going to go. Then suddenly, wham, this encounter comes in and it totally shakes things up. On a micro level, random encounters really add a dynamism to your world that you may think is missing. I see a lot of times people will post, well, why does my world kind of seem dead or flat? Or why do these places seem boring and not living? Well, random encounters can help with that because random encounters are going to inject these things that nobody sees coming, and they can happen at any time, in any place, in any circumstance. So you could have something that seems, mundane, like, okay, we're going in the Underdark or in a cavern and we have to kind of climb down this cliff into a larger cavern area, right? Maybe we came in a tunnel at the top. We're going to take a python, we're going to hammer in some rope, we're going to climb down, and that's it. So, okay. And that might have been the extent of your challenge for that. How does the party get down this cavern wall? And that's it. They just hammer in, use one of their hammers and spikes, go down. Well, maybe now you roll a random encounter and you get something. Now that makes this very easy encounter something difficult, but it's not when it's transparent, when everybody knows that random encounters could happen and then one happens, you don't have to feel like you're the jerk GM. The pressure's not on you to be like, oh my gosh, he's just trying to make this difficult. Oh, he's just trying to do this. No, because as the players, we understand, and I think it's freeing as the GM to understand, this isn't me. This is the world. This is Kismet. This is just fate. You guys were climbing down there and, oh, the worst case scenario happens. Suddenly a pack of goblins are running behind you, coming up behind you, or there are sturges flying in that were here in the cavern that are coming in on the people on the ropes, or maybe there's something now waiting for you at the bottom. What do? You've taken this very static challenge and you've turned it into now that's something really exciting. And yes, you could have plotted that in there, but there's a whole lot of, I don't know, I just feel like a whole lot of creativity that happens when you haven't done that. Because yes, you could have plotted and said, okay, at halfway down the rope, this will happen. All right, fine. So that happens. But you lose out on all its opportunities of what happens if it happened when 2/3 of the party are down and maybe just one or two guys are left on top, and then it happens. What happens if, there's one guy scouting and it happens and nothing else? What happens if they just hear it or they hear things, but nothing actually gets them, right? Nothing comes into contact, but now they've got the tension of, well, wait a minute, I hear sounds coming behind us, or I hear noises coming below us, or I hear something echoing through the top of this cavern. What is it? All these different options. And it's hard to script all of those. It's hard to think of all those. And again, once they're scripted in there, they're going to feel scripted. It's just going to feel like, okay, this is our challenge for the day, as opposed to, we don't know how that we're going to have to handle this because we don't know what other challenges are around us. Because we're not ticking down saying, okay, we know that our DM likes to do six or 7 combats in the adventure day. So this is number 1, 2, 3, 4. So, okay, it's like now, oh, we've got this unknown in here. How do we handle that? Because we don't know what's left around the corner. We don't know what's coming, and we can't spend too long worrying about it because that might trigger more encounters. And that's the great thing with kind of random encounters. There can be one encounter that's unresolved and now another one happens. How does that affect everything? And then maybe you have a set encounter and then these things all interact there. Boom. How does that react? And it all happens in a way that's totally organic because they're not pre-planned. So it's exciting for the players. It can be tension building. And again, they're not going to feel to blame you because they know you're rolling dice and this is just what happens. It's part of the mechanics of the game. It becomes understood as it is a natural consequence that this could happen. And then for you, it's exciting because I thought, okay, the Goblin King is down here, but now the party runs into the Goblin King, but they're really running from these Sturges, and the Goblin King is kind of, what's going on? And now the Sturges are into the room, and maybe the Sturges, they don't have allegiance to anything, so now they're attacking everybody. Now suddenly this encounter with the Goblin King is totally turned on its head, potentially. Maybe the players just run past the Goblin King, keep going, and hope that the Goblin King distracts the Sturges enough so that they don't follow. Who knows what could happen? Those are a lot of fun possibilities, and you unlock those. Random encounters is a way of unlocking that, but unlocking in a way that's fresh for everyone because nobody was expecting it. Not even you as the GM, which I always find is exciting.
All right! Shazam!
The other big complaint I see about random encounters is they're too random. I think this stems from a few things. Number one, I think that you're generating a random encounter. It's generated randomly. That does not mean that it should appear randomly to your players. In the meta, in the mechanics, you're using some kind of random tables, random generator to create an encounter. But you as a GM are going to take the result of all this randomness and you're going to drop it into your campaign, into your adventure. When it gets dropped and it enters in the fiction, it should not appear random. Players should not be looking at it going like it's in Final Fantasy VII and just the landscape swirls and they're inside some kind of weird encounter that makes no sense and has no context. You as the GM are supposed to give it context before you drop the players into it. So there are a couple of ways this pans out. So the first thing there is I think people look at it and go, well, look at these tables of random encounters. They have all these different creatures that don't make sense. So to address that, you have to kind of roll things back a little bit. At the beginning, we're talking, Castle Greyhawk and, Blackmore Castle and all the different, these games we were playing. They featured mega dungeons. Even the early modules, if you look at Keep in the Borderlands, if you look at these different ones, Isle of Dread, they were big areas that were not singular domains. You didn't go into a cave system and it wasn't, this is the lair of the kobolds. It was the kobolds are in this part. It's more like condos or a apartment complex. There are all kinds of monsters vying amongst each other, maybe living in harmony, maybe outright warfare, maybe just staying away from each other in these complexes. So you have goblins that are in this cave. Ogre that's in this cave. There are kobolds that are down there. There are Sturges over here. There's an ogre that's on the next level down that's been hanging out there. There's a dragon that's 5 levels down. There's a giant bowling alley 20 levels down. This sort of thing. In that way, the encounter lists represent that sort of diversity. If this was not, these caves belong only to the goblins, so we should only encounter goblins there. It was that there's a whole ecosystem, a whole flora, fauna, everything down there. I mean, there's a reason why they called it in the first, in the first books, they called it the underworld. They didn't they call them dungeons in there, but it's part of the underworld. This idea that it's a whole other world down there. It's not just somebody's house. But in the modern game, we tend to think about things as, okay, this cave is where the goblins live. This ruin is where an ogre lives. The hobgoblins over here. The orcs are over there. So then how do we take these tables? These tables don't make sense for us. Well, that's you have to go through and you have to make your own tables. If you are concerned about that, right, you're taking just generic tables that are meant for generic dungeons, these generic dungeons of diversity. When you're taking those and you want to adapt them to more specific, more thematic, singular thematic areas with singular thematic enemies, then you have to go through and create your own tables. So you take out the orcs, you take out the Sturges, you take out that stuff, and you put in the stuff you think fits. Okay, we're going to have goblins, and then we'll maybe have goblins and dogs, and maybe we'll have just dogs, and maybe we'll have pigs or whatever they eat that they let run around. Maybe there are stuff that feeds on goblin trash, like, say, giant centipedes, and maybe there's some spiders that are lurking in corners, whatever it is. You do that, and once you make those tables up, then you can run random encounters in these thematic spaces. You can pull up, okay, where's my orc-themed random encounter tables? Here they are. Okay, I'll roll on those. Now, as you can imagine, that's a lot more work. It was a lot less work when you just assumed that everything was sort of cosmopolitan, in which case it wasn't unusual for, say, an orc to show up in this area that maybe had been goblin controlled. So let's go and say that, okay, we're going to go with the generic tables just for simplicity, and maybe you don't have time or you want to utilize this. You're thinking like, yeah, I might give this a try in my next game, but I don't have time to create a whole bunch of new tables. So fine, we're going to use the generic tables. When you roll on those tables and you create an encounter, before you say to your party, oh, there's a random encounter here, you have to use your brain. You have to think about what's the context. So let's say they're going through a kobold stronghold and they're doing stuff. They're sneaking around. It's a whole complex of caves. The kobolds aren't in every square inch of it. So there's areas that tend to be, maybe they're deserted. Maybe they're parts that have been they haven't built them out all the way. They're still under construction. They've kind of just been abandoned for right now, or they've just not there for whatever reason. But the party's doing stuff. The party's exploring, and you decide, okay, I'm going to roll for a random encounter. So you roll the dice. Okay, there's a random encounter. Let me roll, see what it is. Okay, it's an ogre mage. Before you say anything, you now have to think about, why is an ogre mage wandering around this kobold area? Well, there could be a couple things. One, he could be employed by the kobolds. Maybe the kobolds have made a deal with this ogre mage to provide protection, magic, something of that sort. Maybe one of their projects, maybe they captured the kobold mage. Maybe they work for the kobold mage. Maybe the kobold mage is the power behind the power behind the power, the man behind the man, the man behind the throne, or woman behind the throne. Okay, so now we have that. So I haven't said anything yet. The party's still doing what they do. But now I'm thinking about this context. So maybe I decide, okay, they're going through an area that's, maybe it's a little bit deserted, maybe whatever. Maybe they've decided that in the area that they're coming to, there's going to be, and I just might riff off of, maybe I'm looking at my notes and I say, originally it was just a cavern, nothing really, just a cave, dead end. So maybe I'll say instead that, okay, with this coming up, maybe I'll change that. I said, okay, maybe there's some manacles that they've attached to a corner somewhere, and they've put this ogre mage there for whatever reason. They just wanted to get him out of the way and did that, right? That's one way to do it. Because I think, okay, he's a prisoner. It's a prisoner. Let me see. They just threw him in there and kind of bolted him into this empty cave because they couldn't find anywhere else to go. So they said, okay, we're just going to do that. One way to do it. What if the ogre mage is an adventurer of a sort? He's also poking around trying to find something. Maybe there's something that the ogre mage thinks is valuable that's hiding, that the kobolds have hidden. Maybe the party just runs into that mage as that mage is going around doing the similar thing that they are. That's another possibility. Let me think of some things that they could be using for. And I don't even necessarily need to think it all the way through. I really just need some things to set up kind of their motivation, what they're there, because once it goes into play, I want to have some context of what this ogre mage is doing, because maybe the ogre mage is going to come on the players, and because of its goals, maybe it'll make a deal with the players. Maybe the ogre mage will think, okay, these guys don't know what I'm after, and I don't know what they're after either. But if I team up with them, even just temporarily, I can get this thing I need. Maybe I don't have to put myself as much risk because they'll take the front lines, and I can kind of keep myself hold myself back a little bit, hold myself in reserve. And then if I need to deal with them at the end, I can, or I can just sort of swipe my bit and vanish, run away, drop a smoke bomb and teleport away, whatever it is. Maybe I can do that. Which brings me into the next piece of it. So you've rolled for your encounter. And again, I haven't gone into the detail of what percentage you're using. Some people roll 1 in 6. You could roll 1 d20 and pick a number. Say, okay, 5 or less, there's an encounter. How often you do it, there are different methods. I think in the old school, it was once per hour, 6 exploration rounds. You can come up with your own systems. And if I see that there's enough feedback that people want to hear more about the specific mechanics of picking when you roll an encounter and, when you do that, I can go and make another video about that, but I'm just going to stick to the more high-level conceptual part for now. So you rolled your encounter that it's going to happen. You have your ogre mage. Now, the thing that might come into play, which is also important, is where is the ogre mage in relation to the party? Distance. Distance is important. Distance is going to tell you a lot. If you roll the encounter and the ogre mage is right on top of the party, that's going to make a difference in terms of what the ogre mage might do. From your point of view, you're thinking as the ogre mage, what might it might do. And of course, if the party, they're 30 feet away and the party spots them, that's going to make a huge difference compared to if they're 130 feet away. Or even if, that in that case, they might not even be visible. Maybe they can just hear them. Maybe nobody hears them, which will bring me to the next point after this. So distance, big key that really sets up your possibilities. If your party wants to be stealthy, if your party wants to just leverage, if they do decide to attack and they want to leverage missile attacks, if they want to try to escape, run away, all these things, distance is extremely important to determine how feasible they are and how readily they can be accomplished. So it's really important to use distance. And you can come up with whatever scale works for you. I want to say back in here, I want to say their guidance is 20 to 80 feet. So 2d4 times 10 feet, I think. Well, that's Men of Magic. Let me see. I'm looking in the wrong books. I have a piece in Men of Magic that I will discuss momentarily, but let's see what they say in here. If they say, let's see. Sighting monsters. Players will see monsters 20 to 80 feet. Unless they're surprised. If they're surprised, it's 10 to 30 feet. So the full distance, according to the original rules, was basically at the minimum if they're surprised. And in original game, surprise was essentially a flat roll. And I think if you were if you were an elf or a dwarf, I think it was a little bit there. And there were some creatures were, and I think races were a little bit harder to surprise or easier to surprise than others, but the idea was you would roll a flat die to see whether you were surprised or not, and in this case, you would roll the distance after you rolled surprise, because if you were surprised, they could be right on top of you, and if not, they'd be further away. Pick the system that works for you. If you want to check if they're surprised first and then roll distance after that, that's one way, or if you want to roll distance and just have the whole gamut, that's another way. It's kind of weird. Obviously, it makes sense the way they had it originally, just in terms of distance. It's hard to have something just poof 10 feet in front of you if you knew it was coming, right? So maybe you'd say, okay, we're going to roll for surprise, first roll for distance, or we're going to say, in terms of random encounters, they're not ever going to be just 10 feet in front of us unless we're rounding a corner. Because that's another thing you have to look at when you're looking at distance and things, right? You're looking at the geography. Like I mentioned before, if you're looking at a cave system, you think, okay, there's a dead end cave here. Okay, there's only so much distance. 80 feet is in the wall. So if it's going to be that direction, then it can only be in that room. If you're in sort of windy corridors, it could be, they're 10 feet away, but they're around a corner, so you can't see them. In which case, maybe you roll the distance dice and you see how it plays. And of course, with anything you're rolling dice, if they really don't make sense, the party's in a huge open room and there's bright light and visibility is 1,000%, and you roll a random encounter and it's 10 feet, and the floor is steel, there's nothing beneath them, then you go, well, I just can't do it. Then roll again or add 20 feet to whatever makes sense, right? You have to always follow what makes sense in the fiction. If the rolls give you something that is truly nonsensical and you can't wrap your brain around it, do what you need to do to make it make sense.
All right! Shazam!
So you get distance. So right now we've got an enemy, or we've got not a potentially, I don't even want to use the term enemy. We have because I'll get into that too, but we have a creature, we've got a distance. Now we're going to roll for what their attitude is. This is another very important feature, because what oftentimes has happened, I think, over time with random encounters is they turned from potential combat situations to just out and out combat situations. So you would get DMs that would just, I've rolled a random encounter. Okay, everybody, roll initiative. You're just going to fight this thing. That's not how it was supposed to be. You're not really taking advantage of all the tools you have, and you're you're pigeonholing into a very small box. If the only thing you look at with a random encounter is the fact that, goody, they get to fight the ogre mage, because that's only a little bit of the ball game, maybe a third or a quarter. What really the idea is you're supposed to take these things, you're supposed to look at, okay, I've got this creature or creatures, I now know how far away they are, and potentially if who is surprised, does the creature know the party's coming? Does the party know the creatures are coming? Sort of how far away they are. Then we look at, okay, what is their disposition? What's their mood? There are the original classic determination was you'd roll 2d6. Low rolls, the lower your roll was, the more hostile it was. The high end was the most friendly. So you could look at this and it was, okay, so just going from top to bottom, I'm going to go through the numbers. If you roll the 12, right, double sixes, they're enthusiastic and they'll help you potentially. And not only do they help you, but they will actually be more loyal than potentially would be. So you would roll a loyalty score to see, hey, the ogre mage says, oh, you guys, we're aligned. I don't want to fight you. I just need to get this thing for my clan. Let's team up. You guys seem like good people. And then whatever I would roll in secret for how loyal they really are, I would say that not only are they whatever they are, but they're actually, bumped up a notch. So they'd be even more loyal than normal. If they're underneath that from 9 to 11 would be that if you could negotiate with them and they would probably accept an offer of some kind if you wanted to make a trade. If the ogre, faces off with the party and the ogre says something like, hey, look, my fight's not with you, but the Goblin King's got this thing that I need and I just need to get it and I'm not interested in fighting you guys. It's not my battle. And then maybe a party member goes, okay, well, why don't we make this deal then? They would be acceptable to, an offer like that. If they, you'd roll below that, it might be, hey, they're uncertain. They're kind of in that middle ground. Not quite sure. They're neutral, right? And then below that, they're hostile. And then below that, 2, they're going to attack right away. So if you look at that, there is potential ways. There's a lot of most of those options, most of those reaction rolls are non-combat. There's only one of them that suggests that they just outright attempt to attack you right away. And that's a natural 2. Even at the lower end, 3 to 5, where it says hostile reaction, yeah, they may be bulk, that may be like, you might see an animal that raises the hackles and starts to growl. Like it's showing you that it's not happy with you, but it's not just jumping up and fighting you. And at that point, as a party, you can decide, do we want this battle? Or do we want to back off? How do we want to proceed? The party has options, and most of those options does not have to be combat. It could be, we're just going to back away. It could be, we're going to let this thing go through. If the ogre mage is like, let me through here, I'm going to do that. Hey man, go about your business. We'll wait and then let you go. It could be, if it was an animal, maybe we could give him some food and it'll leave us alone. You have all these options before you, and really only the most negative reactions would lead to them just outright attacking you. That's not to say that you shouldn't override these, as always, with if you have something in mind or if the players do something or whatever. But I see something that happens with GMs where players will do something and the GM, I think, already has in their mind kind of this direction, and then they just jump into it. So the party's up on the ogre mage. You're like, okay, they're kind of hostile. Then the fighter tries to kind of be a little intimidating. And then you just jump the gun and say, oh, they attack. Slow your roll. Let the stuff play out. Just because the party does this, don't just jump the gun right away. Maybe you could make another reaction score with some modifier. Maybe you could use a kind of a type of morale roll or something like that to determine what they do. I think you gotta, the idea here is you're given space to let these things play out so that you're not just running random combat encounters, but you're running random encounters that have a possibility for combat. And I think that's very different things, and it's very different possibilities that you have with them. If combat is an option and the players are aware that it's not the only option, given that there are other objectives in play, they may decide not to just murder hobo it. Particularly when it's a random encounter and they know that if they murder hobo it and they use up resources, that's less resources for all the stuff that they know is waiting for them. So they know that the Goblin King is still down there. The Goblin King's 3 lieutenants are still down there. There's still X amount of goblin troops down there. But we've got this ogre mage right here. If we just fight him or her and it's a tough battle, now we don't have resources maybe, or we're going to be running tight for these other battles that we know are down there. Then we have to think about, do we retire and try to rest? How do we do that? And that, hopefully, if you're playing a game and you're using time and other elements, that has its own challenges. So you've given them things to think about that may point them away from just fighting. Even if it's they may see it as a relatively easy fight. They may see it as, well, this ogre mage is I got that in my stool, but he's got spells and he's willing to help us. I'd rather have an extra spellcaster out there than not. And I don't want him maybe running around behind us and maybe coming up on us. So I'd rather have him with me if we're not going to fight him right now. So let's see if he wants to come along. Now, I've been pulling a lot from the original books. Those are from the white box, but there are rules for some of the stuff in the DMG. There we go. The DMG 5th edition. Underrated tome. A long time ago, I did a video on hidden gems of the DMG. I should probably do something more. Maybe redo that. Maybe do an addendum or something. But for those of you who have the DMG at home, on page 244, they have rules for social interaction. And part of that, they have starting attitudes and conversation reactions. Conversation reactions has to do with making charisma checks on different things. And depending on the starting attitude of the creature, how they might respond. It's a little bit wonky. Not that there's anything wrong with this. They give you 3 starting reactions that they can have. One is friendly, one is indifferent, one is hostile. But here, and I don't know if there's another section here, but because this is under social interactions, they're assuming when you get to starting attitude that the creature is already amenable to a social interaction. When the random encounter we're starting from, we don't know whether the creature's open to a social encounter or not. We're trying to figure out if it is. And within that, we don't know, because it's random, whether they are friendly, indifferent, or hostile. Now, of course, as a GM, you could make a call. You could always make a call and say, this ogre mage is hostile, or, oh, I think they're friendly, whatever. But I think it's always more fun to let the dice speak, because you get those interesting serendipitous events of maybe a creature that is usually evil and hates all life and everything but their own kind, and for whatever reason and circumstance, madness, they've decided that they want to pal around with these adventurers for some reason. And you can have fun thinking about, well, why would this lost beholder want to make friends with this party? And well, maybe he's got a plan, maybe he's got something else, maybe this or that. Could be a whole plot, a whole new adventure opens up on this this thing. On this turn. So you got to figure it out in some way. You could roll dice. You have 3 options. You can roll a 1d6. One is hostile, 2 to 5 is indifferent, 6 is friendly, or however you want to work it out. But you've got these, you've now determined what the attitude of this potential adversary, but potential ally as well, is. So you have these 3 things. You have what the creature or creatures, what they are, where they are in relation to the party, and their disposition. What is their attitude? So you're going to take those things together. You have thought about the context, why the creatures are here, and possibly what they want, which is important if they're going to be wheeling and dealing with the players. Potentially, they need to have goals for them. What do they want? Maybe what are they willing to give up to get there? That kind of thing. So take a moment. And I always say, a lot of times you get caught up in the game and then you just kind of blurt something out. If you need to take a moment to figure this stuff out, take that moment. Say, hey, give me a minute, take a bathroom break, go outside for a sec. I gotta figure this out. Much better to take a moment to get yourself right than end up just trying to be off the cuff and you're not ready, and then you create big issues. So you've got this context for the creature. You've got, obviously that context. What do they want? Who they are. What do they want? Where they are in terms of the party, which will help you lay out. They're close, but because of the way the dungeon's area they are, the party can't see them. So now you can talk about what do they hear. You could make perception checks or passive perception. They may hear noises. They may see shadows. They don't know what it is, and that adds a whole other element for where they are. And then the disposition of the creatures. And when you have all that stuff, then you lay it out to the party and you present it, and you don't just say, give me initiative, right? You present it in a way that allows them to absorb what you've put in front of them, and hopefully make sure they're aware of that they have this latitude to make decisions. That just because these kobolds have showed up where you least expected them doesn't mean that it's just initiative time. Maybe you can make a deal. And that encourages players, like they did in old times, to take monstrous languages. My cat just threw up. take monstrous languages, because if you don't speak kobold, it's hard to communicate with the kobolds. If you speak giant, then you can maybe talk to the giants, that sort of thing. Really make sure it gives them a lot of value. It allows some of these player characters, maybe if either the players aren't super combat focused or their characters aren't, it gives them an opportunity when something happens to shine, to step to the fore, put their hand on the shoulder of the big burly paladin or barbarian or fighter that wants to just go carve whatever it is up into 1,000 pieces. Let me handle this and do something like that. Obviously, wizards have spells that they can deploy. A lot of options. And so now you have this situation that is totally new. It's totally dynamic. It's totally unthought of by you or anticipated by the party. And that's fun for me because now I get to use my creativity and my imagination to think about, this is a whole new wrinkle. What happens here? Maybe down the line I think about, the Goblin King had this stuff from the Ogre Mage. What was it, Ogre Mage's clan? And how does that fit in? So I may get a whole new angle into my adventure, into my campaign, just from a random encounter, because guess what? Inside the fiction, it's not random. Inside the fiction, this Ogre Mage was running around, or he was captured, or he's being worshipped by whatever. That's not part of the story. It's not just the thing that I'm dropping in, like in Final Fantasy VII, then you get dropped out again, and it means nothing other than, I had to use a Phoenix down, or I just wasted some mana. It's part of the world. It was fated to happen, and so it happened, and there it is. And maybe there will be more of that, maybe there will not, but this happened. It's part of the story now. It's part of our shared story of playing. Anyhow, that's all I got for this one. I hope that was informative. I hope it helped. Please let me know in the comments if you think this was useful, as far as maybe putting a little bit of giving a little different spin on random encounters, or maybe, I hope maybe made you rethink them as a tool that you can use. I got a jet for now, but I will check back in and I try to answer people who comment. I don't get so many comments that I can't go back in there. So please let me know if you like this. Please give me a thumbs up. It does help a lot. Subscriptions help a lot if you want to subscribe and hit the little bell dingy thingy somewhere to let you know when things are happening. That'll help a lot. I have a Patreon. I will link to that in the show notes. I have Ko-Fi if you'd like to donate that way. Help me potentially buy Wirecast if it turns out that this is the best. I'll have to go back and look at how this stream turned out when I'm all done. But really, thanks for tuning in and watching however much you watched. I'm recording this on a Friday, so have a great weekend. But whenever you're watching it and however you're watching it, have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.